Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome all you citizens of the world. I'm Michael James, and it's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This is our 4th of July show for the week of the 4th of July. And usually this is a time of joy and celebration and remembering the mostly good things our country has done. This year, I'm not so sure where it's at. We are going to have John de Graaf, the filmmaker, come on. We're going to talk about his film From Sea to Shining Sea, about Katharine Lee Bates and the story of America the Beautiful. But first, I'm going to give some comments on patriotism and where I'm at on things. And then we're going to be joined by our sometimes co-host and one of our producers, Katy Hogan, talking about her thoughts on this 4th of July. I grew up in Connecticut, and there was a lot of the Revolutionary War legacy everywhere I went in my hometown. There were some cannons down by the beach. I lived on a road called Redcoat Road. There were still farms there, and Redcoat Road was named about the Redcoats, the British soldiers who had marched nearby up what is now Route 7 to Danbury, where they burned the hat factories. We played Fight the British. We were big on Abraham Lincoln and the Union soldiers. We used to march around singing John Brown's Body Lies a Moldering in the Grave. I grew up nourished, I think, by the YMCA, by Cub Scouts, teams I played on in junior high and high school. I was really enthused and moved by Jackie Robinson and the Brooklyn Dodgers after the color barrier had broken. When I was in college, I joined the platoon leader corps to be a Marine. That did not come to fruition after a group of anti-war, anti-nuclear bomb people came marching through. A scraggly bunch came through Lake Forest College and talked about no war, kind of turned me around on being a Marine. I had been a big fan of President Kennedy and still like some of the things he was about. But I went to Mexico and he came there, and this was in 1962. And lo and behold, I saw signs that said, Kennedy, largate, get out. And I was a little confused at first, but I started asking, I was 20 years old. I started asking a lot of questions. I always thought we had been the good guys. Not so sure anymore after that. And but I did write a poem, or at least a message, what I call a message to my people, back on the eve of 4th of July in 1975. So I'm going to share that with you all now. Here I go. A 4th of July message to my people. America, it is the eve 4th of our bicentennial, and we find that the bottle has let us down. We are still singing Trouble in Mind, but the sun will shine in our backyard someday, and in the front yard too. In fact, right in through the front door. We will no longer sing more songs of sorrow than of joy, for the time will come when we, the people of this land, in unison with the world over, will let our collective lights shine. I always have believed in this country. I've always been critical of parts of our government and various issues. I've seen us on a progression toward a better world. I'm not so sure anymore. We've seen a big setback with the election of the current president for the second round. We saw just this week a passing of a bill that will not only add great amounts to the deficit, but will certainly leave a lot of people in a very precarious state around their health. There's just a host of negative issues associated with the bill. We just heard not so long ago this morning that only 18 members of Congress out of 535 signed a letter joining Representative Rashida Tlaib in urging the Trump administration to stop supporting Israel's starvation of Gaza and the killing of hungry Palestinians. And I'm going to read who the signers were, because maybe you can contact your congressperson if they weren't on this list. Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Delia Ramirez, Henry Johnson Jr., Greg Cesar, Chuy Garcia, Nadia Velasquez, Chile Pingree, Mark Pocan, Bonnie Watson, Coleman, Elon Omar, Al Green, Summer Lee, James McGovern, Jonathan Jackson, Pramila Jayapal, Ayanna Presley, Paul Tonko, and Senator Bernie Sanders. Hooray to all of them. And if you're following the news, you've seen that people in Gaza, their homes bombed out, are starving. And the U.S. and Israel has set up a food program that is minimal, and literally hundreds of people have been killed waiting in line trying to get food. I long have held the belief that America someday would be viewed in the world community as a nation that works for the good of the whole. And I've long believed that white people who are a minority in the world will be recognized as a people, a race that joins with others to do good work for the good of the whole. I'm not so sure where things are at. I think a lot of people have been turned around, and while I'd like to think of us evolving in a better and better way, I'm not so sure where it goes. We started out in primitive communes. We were hunters and gatherers. We learned to use tools. We learned to do agriculture. We mechanized. We grew. We evolved. More and more people populated the planet. And, we're in a hell of a situation today. We had a stable world community on one front, working in a positive direction, but lo and behold, we're now being critical of our neighbors, our former allies. We are withdrawing support for people in the Ukraine in their military efforts against the onslaught of the Russian giant trying to take over their turf. We have civil wars in Africa. We have this issue of immigration at home. There's not enough talk about climate change. Climate change is driving people. People are on the move. They need a place to go. We helped to create the problem that has led to all this situation. We're the most mechanized, the most developed country. And lo and behold, we are not using it in a positive way. We are not even trying to further the development of solar energy. We're trying to go back to coal. We're talking about kicking people out of the country where there are thousands and thousands of jobs that are unfilled in this country. Okay, that's enough of that. I'm going to take a short little musical break. Maybe we'll play a little bit of John Brown's Body Lies a Moldering in the Grave. And my business partner, good friend, partner in this radio show, producer Katy Hogan, on her way to work this morning, stopped to give us a few of her thoughts. So we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. And do have a reflective 4th of July weekend. Think about all the people in the world that need your help and support and the tasks ahead of us. We're not sure the direction, how we take it all on, but we need to do something. And I'm sure that many of you out there listening to this show are on board. Be right back.
John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. But his soul goes marching on. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down on the grave of old John Brown. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Okay, all you citizens of the world, enough of what I have to say about the 4th of July. I've asked our sometimes co-host and producer Katy Hogan to join me, an all-American girl, to talk about what the 4th of July in this year, 2025, under certain circumstances, means to her. So good morning to you, Katy, and thanks for joining us before you go off for a long day of work.
Thank you, and thanks for putting me on. I hope you have a number of voices chiming in today. So how I feel approaching this 4th of July, very different than I have ever felt in my life, because we are in a different country now. Thanks to the vote yesterday, the big ugly. I'm not quite sure what to say. I mean, we have the truth of the Republican Party is now the party of Trump, and they can't think for themselves. They can't do anything for themselves. They are people without thinking brains. I mean, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who could have stopped this bill, just her vote. And she said immediately after casting it, that's not a good bill. Now, I heard from my neighbor just this morning across the way that Alaskans went nuts at some kind of public meeting and kind of actually were attacking whoever the speakers were. I was trying to find it before I came on, but I couldn't. So my hope is that Americans wake up. I mean, we have had as many as 5 million people in the streets on one day. That's a minimum. That's a conservative number, I think. And most of us who've been on your show were amongst those people in the streets. We have a lot of people who say, oh, what good does demonstrating do? You know what? I don't know, but you better damn demonstrate. I mean, I have long felt Americans take absolutely for granted what we have here. And I know that because I have been in other countries. And part of the reason I think Americans do take what we have here for granted is they haven't been in other countries in a deep way. They haven't gone to places that don't speak English. They haven't gone to places that used to be called third world. They don't go places where the water doesn't come out of the tap and the stoplights don't work and people don't honor laws and the leadership is corrupt. Well, now America is that place. Our leadership is as corrupt as it can be, in the executive branch. And I'm afraid to say that anybody who is a Republican senator is now also tainted with that corruption. I mean, the Republicans are always claiming to be the fiscal responsibility, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, it's been proven for years. Every Democratic administration ends up with a close to or a really balanced budget. Every Republican administration comes in, wipes out that balanced budget, and puts us further in debt. Yesterday, the GOP tax plan that passed in our Senate yesterday adds $3 trillion to the deficit. This from the deficit watchers of so many years. So it's understandable why people would, sort of throw up their hands and say, yeah, I can't do anything. But in America, we can do something. And when you see people in the streets of totalitarian states like Serbia and Iran, and people filling the streets, risking their lives. Now, I do know, as of the new administration, some people taking to the streets in America would be risking their lives, which is why I would say to all the white people out there, get your asses in the streets. It's our turn to stand up for all the people of color who are being pulled off the street, incarcerated. I mean, I can't, I'm so utterly disgusted by the combination of this bill passing the Senate on the same day that number 47 goes to the Everglades to visit his newest deportation concentration camp, the, Alligator Alcatraz. He's so, effing cute, isn't he? I mean, it's so funny to make fun of people dying in incarceration. And that's what Holman, his Homeland Security, said. Oh, people die in prison all the time. That was his response to being asked a question about a Cuban who was picked up, who has lived in this country for 60 years, working, raising a family. He was incarcerated, and he died last week. And this effing dingbat says, oh, people die in prison all the time. Well, that's a real responsible answer, MF, a real responsible answer. So I am angry. On Friday morning, I will do what I've done every Friday morning for the last 17 or 18 of them, which is join with others on Sheridan Road with the flag, with the signs, with the little bells saying, this is not okay. This is not okay. And this show won't be heard until after we do that, but it's what a lot of us do just for ourselves. But it's also for the people passing by in the cars who honk their horns a lot, to say to them, you're not alone. We also think this is not okay. And I do think that America should take back the 4th on Friday. I know it's going to be a hot day here. I don't know how the weather's going to be other places, but people should take to the streets, everyone should be calling their congressperson today in utter dismay over this bill and saying, I don't care what party you belong to, you can't pass this bill. This bill gives millions and billions of dollars to defense, which does not need it, to Homeland Security, which is basically raising that money right now as a stopgap measure because they've already spent their budget on all these masked guys descending on American streets and pulling people off them and kidnapping them and sending them to another country. It's all incredible. Not even going to the fact that they're also doing what they've so long wanted to do, which is mess with Obama's Affordable Care Act. Between the cuts to Medicare and their cuts to ACA, they're throwing supposedly 17 million people off their insurance. This is hell in a handbasket time, and that's where we're headed. And I can't stand it, but I also I join with others to protest it in order to be able to look myself in the eye. If I didn't make calls every week to DC, if I didn't stand on the street corner every Friday, if I didn't join in the phone banks that are happening, which everybody can join in from their homes, Move On, Indivisible, they're all running phone banks right now. Just go and find one. And you don't need special training to make phone banks, but they give it. And it's helpful. And people should be activating. If I wasn't doing those things, I don't know if I could live with myself. We are blessed in this country, and people have no clue what they are allowing to be lost every single day that this guy is in power and allowed to carry on. I mean, it's so I'm sorry. I know that's what you know to expect from me, but that's my rant today. And I will fight for this country as long as I can.
I really appreciate hearing your rant because it's not like I haven't heard them before, but it's getting more developed and pointed and focused on the real enemy, so to speak. I would like to, before you run off to your day of work in the gardens, I'd love it if you would just talk a little bit about growing up and what made you love America, because I know you do love our country, even if you are critical of the government and some of the segment of the population.
I think I'm too emotional to do that right now. We were all raised, you too, we were all raised post-World War II. So we were all raised to be patriots, despite the fact that some of the facts were not available to us as young people growing up in terms of how we did not support a ship of Jews coming over from the Holocaust and turning the ship around, that sort of thing. But we all were under the impression that America went in, joined that war to save the world, basically. And so we felt pretty good about ourselves, right? Growing up, we watched war movies, we cheered on John Wayne until we found different. But what it did was it gave me very high expectations for our nation, which expectations I still have. And that is that we are not corrupt, that we don't sell our rights or our treasures, that we don't commit to atrocious acts of violence against people in other countries. And pretty much all of those things started to fall down. I mean, starting for me with awareness of institutionalized racism in our country, but especially in my own city here in Chicago, housing, jobs, healthcare, that it became clear to me, and I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask to know this stuff, by the way. I didn't ask to be an activist, but the combination of being sitting here with white skin privilege in the luckiest place to be born in the world, and not standing up when things are not going the way they should, when people are not paying attention to people's rights, when people are stomping on the Constitution. And, it's not new. We've been demonstrating since the 60s, once we figured out some really terrible decisions could be made, like let's go bomb Vietnam, who we had nothing against. And all that was on, to serve the oil interests and the commercial interests that would be given, free whole hog access to whatever over in Southeast Asia. And everything since has been a realization of where the corruption does lie and where there is basically not caring about the people who need stuff in America. This treatment of particularly Latino immigrants is so disgusting, given what you and I both know about the work ethic of these immigrants and their way of life, supporting their families, sending money back to Mexico, going back to Mexico, which is their first love. They only come here to support the economy of their own families and villages. That's been true for decades. And now the treatment that they're receiving, it tears me up every time I see it. So I'm gotta go to work now.
Katy Hogan, I really thank you for coming on. And I know this is, probably puts you in a mood for your work, but I'm sure the flowers at the job will cheer you up a little bit. And I know that you have the commitment to go forward, and you shine the light for a lot of us and give us some direction. And I appreciate that. I've known you now since
50 years.
Yeah, 50 years. And we've had our arguments and our differences, but you continue to inspire me. And I am really grateful for that.
And I am grateful for you, Michael James, and for you, Hal James, for keeping this little program on the air. It's dear to my heart, and I love what you do. I'm so happy that you're going to have John de Graaf on later this show.
Yeah, John de Graaf. We're going to talk about a movie, From Sea to Shining Sea, and a concert that happened around it. We thought that this song, America the Beautiful, is something that we might want to address today.
Why don't you play Ray Charles' version of it?
Well, exactly. That's what it's in the movie. And we also were going to play, I think, a little bit of John Brown's Body Lies a Moldering in the Grave, too, because I remember feeling very patriotic and pro-Union soldiers during the Civil War reenactments of my youth. You have a good day, Katy Hogan, and everyone else. Stay tuned. We'll take a short musical break, and we'll be back with more Live from the Heartland. This is our 4th of July presentation, and we hope you are enjoying it, and stick around for a little bit more. Be right back.
Beautiful, for heroes prove in liberating strife. Who more than self our country loved, and mercy more than life. America.
Okay, all you citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of July 4th in the year 2025. And we're going to bring on an old friend, the one and only John de Graaf up there in Seattle. Hello, John.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm really glad that you have a new movie out. We thought it was really appropriate for the 4th of July week. We wish things in the country were going a little bit more in a progressive direction, but I think we're all being challenged, and hopefully we will emerge victorious over time. With that said, we're going to talk about your new film, From Sea to Shining Sea, and it's about Katharine Lee Bates, who was a Falmouth, Massachusetts native, went to Wellesley College, and she wrote America the Beautiful. John de Graaf, tell us how you got interested in this topic.
Well, I've always been interested in making films about Americans who made some kind of difference, who took on some of the problems that we face and difficulties that we face, but also had a belief that we could make America better, that it wasn't hopeless. And so they tried to do something about it. And so I've had a series of biographies like that. My last one here about the life of Stuart Udall. But I found out about Katharine Lee Bates' story and found it fascinating because everyone knows, and I thought it would make an interesting television because everyone knows the song America the Beautiful, but everyone sings only the first verse. And they think of it as some kind of gung-ho, patriotic, cheer the troops song like the national anthem. It is anything but that. And what I discovered is that when you look at the three other verses of the song, it's really a critique of American society in the era that she lived, which was during the Gilded Age. It's a critique of the inequality. It's a critique of our imperialism later in the Spanish-American War. And it's a critique of poverty amidst plenty. And she was really a reformer, a supporter of all kinds of important things. And I thought, this is a fascinating story because it will be surprising to people that this song isn't what they thought it was, and that she herself is an inspiring story.
Tell us a little bit more about Katharine Lee Bates.
Well, Bates was born in Falmouth, Massachusetts, right before the Civil War. Her first memory was the assassination of President Lincoln. And this grieved her immensely, even though she was only 5 years old, because even then she believed in Lincoln's fight to abolish slavery. And she wrote about things like that as a kid. By the time she was 8 years old, she was writing pieces about the mistreatment of American Indians, for example. And she was a very precocious kid. And she liked to write poetry even as a child. And eventually she ended up at Wellesley College in the second class, starting in 1876. The school was founded in 1875. And there she distinguished herself as, of course, the class poet, but also class president and somebody who was looked up to. And she told a friend at that time, while she was in college, that if she could write a poem that someone remembered after she died, she would consider her life worth living. Well, obviously, with American the Beautiful, that happened. But anyway, she later became a professor at Wellesley College, and she taught there for 40 years. And during that time, she was involved in things like the women's suffrage movement, in the resettlement movement, and the settlement houses, and support for immigrants, and a whole number of progressive causes. During the Spanish-American War, she went to Spain and wrote articles for the New York Times about how Spain had suffered from the war, and she joined the Anti-Imperialist League in Boston, opposing that war, but especially opposing the war in the Philippines, which she thought was just horrific. So it's interesting that President Trump today praises McKinley while at the same time he played America the Beautiful at his inaugural, because there was no president that Bates despised more than McKinley in his imperialistic designs on places. And she would see the same about what Trump has talked about in terms of Greenland, Panama, Canada, all of those kind of things. She would be appalled by that kind of behavior. She writes in the song, America, America, God shed his grace on thee, confirm thy soul in self-control. And this is about not being an imperialistic country.
How did her times, it sounds like a lot of the issues remain from what she was addressing and what we have. How do you compare those, and how do you see those two things together?
Well, a lot of them were similar. The issues of war obviously still remain. We're still out bombing other countries. We're still supporting some pretty horrific things in the Middle East. We are still oppressing immigrants and treating them like garbage. And this is not to say that the border should be open completely or anything like that, but this ICE stuff, this terrible mistreatment of immigrants, would not be tolerated by someone like Bates. She was very opposed to this. We obviously are still dealing with the aftermath of racism. We're still dealing with racism. So we have and still poverty. In fact, we now have the biggest gap between rich and poor since the Gilded Age, and it might soon be bigger than during the Gilded Age. So all these issues are still there. We have also one huge elephant in the room, one issue that Bates never would have even imagined, and that is climate change, which we don't even talk about now. We're so full of all these other problems.
Yeah, a lot of these problems are because of climate change. I mean, migration, people on the move, hunger, starvation, war. It's pretty intense. How about giving our listeners and our viewers, what is the Gilded Age and how does the song address it?
Well, the Gilded Age is a period between about the end of the Civil War, roughly 1870, until the Progressive Era began right around the turn of the 20th century. So it's a period in which the great robber barons, Rockefeller, Morgan, Carnegie, seized immense amount of wealth, and the American public in general, became rather immiserated. It's also a period in which millions of Americans were immigrating here from poor countries in Europe and elsewhere. And it is the period of Reconstruction, when Jim Crow laws and all these things came into existence. So there are these similarities. Mark Twain called it the Gilded Age because it was such a conspicuous display of wealth in the midst of poverty. So that was Twain's term. But we did something about it. We had the Progressive Era, which really changed things quite immensely, and then later Franklin Roosevelt even more so. But we did something about it, and people like Bates wanted to do something about it. So that's what the Gilded Age was. We're in the middle of another one.
She originally wrote this song in 1893, I believe. And I think from what I've read about it and what I've seen of the movie, she changed the song in 1904. What was the issue that moved her in that direction?
Yeah, even in 1893, she originally wrote about the Gilded Age, may God thy gold refine. That's a metaphor for the fact that we were obsessed with the conspicuous display of wealth, and she thought gold should be something different. She said then, till selfish gain no longer stains the banner of the free. Now, she moderated those words later. She kind of changed them a little bit. She softened them so they weren't so explicit, but that's what she meant. But in 1904, she added words to the song that went, America, America, God mend thine every flaw, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty and law. And this was a direct reference to the Spanish-American War, which she abhorred, and she thought the U.S., which was a former colony itself, and was a beacon of independence, had no business taking over other countries. So she did change the words. she also had a whole line, and there's a whole verse in the song that your audience might be particularly interested in because it's about Chicago.
That
So
was my
when-
next question. I was going to
Okay.
say, Chicago is the center of the universe, and I wonder how the song connects to Chicago. Fill us in.
It connects. A whole quarter of the song is about Chicago. So anyway, in 1893, she came west to Colorado Springs to teach college, and that's when she went to the top of Pikes Peak and saw the mountain majesties and the plains, and actually wrote the first verses to the song from her experience on Pikes Peak. But on the way to Colorado, she stopped off in Chicago to meet her partner of 25 years. They lived together in Wellesley. She was another professor, Catherine Coleman, whose family was in Chicago. So Bates met her there, and they continued on together. But Coleman took Bates to the 1893 World Exposition, the Chicago World's Fair, if you will, with this gleaming white city, the marble city. And she experienced this, and she found it beautiful, and like people did, and felt it would be nice to have America that could have beautiful cities. But she also found out that right next door, only blocks away from this big alabaster city, as she calls it in the song, "An Alabaster City's Gleam," was the slum where the slum where Jane Addams had her Hull House. And this slum was full of starving, hungry, and desperate people. So she wrote a poem about this, and then she writes in the song, "Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears," because at the Chicago World's Fair, they were dimmed by the human tears that were all around them. So again, this is metaphor. It's poetry. It's not designed to hit you in the face. But the meaning, once you know where she was and what she did, is very clear.
I know that people can find the film online. Are you showing this around the country, and is it going to come to Chicago?
It's not online yet. Just the trailer is online on the website. We hope it is available from a company called Bullfrog Films.
Oh, yeah.
We're hoping to get it especially out to schools, because we really believe it's a great film for high school and college students to learn something about our history. And it's perfect class length because it's 37 minutes, so it gives a teachers time to talk about it as well. But we are hoping to bring it to Chicago this fall, and probably either in late October or early November. And I've been working with a couple of people there. I think you know Mirko Popatic, and some other folks there, trying to find a venue for that and to show it there, because obviously it has an immense connection to Chicago.
Well, if it comes to Chicago, we'll help promote it, and we'll get to see you in person. If people want to find the trailer, they can go to www.sea2shiningseafilm.org. That's sea2shiningseafilm.org. And just while I'm at it, you can find a lot of information about John's other films, including the film on Stuart Udall that we had him on probably a year or so ago, at www.johnd, that's D-E, Graaf, Graaf.com. Now, how about talking a little bit about, we've kind of had the America the Beautiful and Not So Beautiful theme running through this show today. It is the 4th of July show for the week of 4th of July. How is the song connected to July 4th?
Well, it was published on July 4th, 1895. Uh-huh. It's certainly a song that is sung many, many places July 4th. And not to go into this in any depth, but July 4th, this July 4th, the Boston Pops Orchestra will be playing a musical version of my film. They commissioned the narration from the film and video from the film, and they added to that a score by the ragtime winning composer Stephen Flaherty. So they're playing that in their big July 4th conference in Boston, concert in Boston, Friday evening. I think it shows the interest in the film, and it is perfect for July 4th because it reminds us of, as Stephen Kinzer, was a New York Times writer, is a professor who wrote about the Spanish-American War, says in the film, it's about my kind of patriotism. It should be our national anthem. By that, he means that it's about a patriotism that doesn't just go rah, 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 America first, and, nobody, God bless America, no one else, et cetera, but it's about making America all that it can and should be, and what most of us believe it should be.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I've always loved my country, been a little critical of certain governments and our practices, but this song with the newly revealed verses that a lot of us don't know really hits the mark for these times. Ray Charles did a version of the song, and it's pretty popular. You hear it a lot. We used it coming into this segment, and we may use it going out. I'm not sure. But what did he want from the song?
Well, Ray Charles wanted America to be, it was one of his favorite songs for sure. He loved it, and he wanted it to be our national anthem. And he spent 6 years off and on lobbying Congress to try to make it the national anthem. Of course, he was unsuccessful, but it's not over yet. We still have a chance to do that once we elect some people to back in power who know what America actually should stand for, and not
principles.
the people who are there now, but the principles. Then I think maybe we'll think about making it the national anthem, or maybe This Land Is Your Land, but a song that celebrates the better values of America, not bombs bursting in air and troops marching everywhere and so forth like the present. I think that's an important thing that we can do.
Yeah, things are pretty rough, and it's hard to be really patriotic given what's going on in Gaza and Africa and Ukraine, not to mention the streets of America with thugs grabbing people off the street, masked bandits, so to speak. It's really a lot of us who have been active for a long time and seen a lot of negativity in the country definitely see this as the worst of times so far. And probably get a little worse. But
it's funny, in our day, of course, we were very critical of Lyndon Johnson, and justly so, about the war in Vietnam. But I think we now, seeing what we've got today, we look back on Lyndon Johnson and kind of really wish for someone like him.
Tell me a little bit about what patriotism means to you, John.
Well, it means that, if you love your country and you love the ideals of the country, and those ideals were not always, even from the beginning, the best. There were flaws. The people who did them were flawed, but it was at least example at the time of giving people some kind of right, as opposed to the king and the monarchs and all of those. It was a beacon to people from around the world who came here, who made it better in many, many ways. And I want to continue to make it better. Patriotism is about, to use the Army slogan, make your country all it can be. And so people who seem to think that if you don't like everything the way it is, you should get out and go somewhere else, that is not patriotism. That's a fraud. And Mark Twain especially really criticized this kind of phony patriotism that's just about America first. Now, Katharine Lee Bates was not that kind of patriot. She was someone who believed in the rest of the world and in the world as a community who could come together. In fact, in her final speech given to 3,000 people in Boston's Mechanics Hall in 1928, she talked to the crowd and said they should see, when she writes about From Sea to Shining Sea, they should see that as meaning the whole world, all the oceans and people of the world, not just the Atlantic to the Pacific, but the earth is one community from sea to shining sea. And that's what patriotism means to me.
That's nice. I want to ask you a little bit about yourself now, a little bit about where do you come from and how did you get into filmmaking, and then share a little information on some of your other films. I've always been impressed with you from the get over that Vondervogel piece you did. and I keep every time I see you, I bring it up. But I know you did a book called Affluenza. You did a film. You did a lot. But I'd be curious to know a little bit out. Where did you start out? Where did you grow up? And what did you do? What led you to the documentary filmmaking?
Well, those who know me best would probably say I came from Mars, but actually,
you and me both.
Actually, I grew up in San Francisco, California. Spent a lot of time in the mountains. My dad took me to Yosemite when I was a kid, and that I fell in love with the national parks and with backpacking and the beauty of the Sierra Mountains and John Muir's fight to save our public lands, which are again endangered as they always are. Although it's the one decent thing they did. They stripped that thing from the bill, Mike Lee's abominable thing to sell 2 million acres of the public lands. They took that out. And so that was one positive that we got. But I believed in the public lands. I believed in I wanted to be a park ranger when I was a kid. But I ended up going to school, getting involved in the anti-war movement like you and others, becoming very interested in social change. And then starting to see documentary films and thinking, maybe that's a way I can contribute. I like to write. I was always a writer. Had a radio talk show like you on University of Minnesota radio. And so I finally met an old guy who was 85 then, who was a Corsican immigrant to the U.S., who distinguished himself. He never went past the 6th grade. He was an iron miner who was fired and blacklisted when he tried to start a union, but he ended up as a U.S. congressman. And it was pretty amazing. He distinguished himself in Congress. Later on, went on to be a union leader, and at 85 was still a very dynamic guy. And he had such a good voice that he had a tryout. He was given a tryout for the New York Metropolitan Opera. Now, he didn't make it, but he came very close. They wanted him to try out, which is something. And he could still sing beautifully at 85. So he inspired me. He was the kind of individual that I then wanted to make films about. And I've made many others since, although I've also made a lot of films that have been about big issues rather than about people.
What are some of your big issue films?
Well, the big one was Affluenza, which was about the impact of consumerism on America, on our environment, on our gap between rich and poor, on all of those kind of things. That was kind of my mega success, and it also turned into a book. I also did a film that we shot quite a bit of in Chicago called Running Out of Time, which was about the history of overwork in America and the fight for the 8-hour day and the fight for vacation time and other things, which we are still the only industrial country that doesn't have by law. We're still the only industrial country, only wealthy country that doesn't have paid sick leave, paid family leave, paid vacation time, all of those things by law. Every other wealthy country and many, many poor countries have those things. I don't know. And of course, healthcare, universal healthcare, we don't have that all the rest of those countries have. So this was a film about that, looking into the whole history of the fight for the shorter work time, vacation time. And I think that was one of my more popular films.
Well, we got just a couple minutes left, John de Graaf, but give me a quickie on how you perceived affluenza and abundance a number of years ago and where that's at today. And then I'm going to ask you, the final question is, I'll do them both. What do you got in the can, or what are you working on?
Okay. Well, I think a lot of people are suffering now. And so the film Affluenza probably would not be responded to the same way that it was in the late 1990s during the Clinton boom. But that doesn't. I didn't mean. I meant
that was good. That was good.
This maybe it was a Freudian slip. I don't know. But anyway, the country is still hugely affluent. We are a very, very rich country. The problem is now it's just increasingly divided. So you can have one person who has a $50 million wedding. Obscene. I mean, while there are people who can't put food on the table. I mean, this is disgusting. We talk about that in the film Affluenza, but it wasn't quite as bad then. In fact, that was one of the better times in our history. So it's still there. The other question was, what am I doing now? I'm working on a film actually about a different look at affluence. We're obsessed in this country, both parties, both political parties, with the whole idea of economic growth. If we grow the economy 2%, 4%, everything is cool. But the problem is we live on a finite planet. You can't keep growing. We have to find some way to make the economy sustainable, or we're going to get rid of ourselves as a species. So it's the story of Herman Daly. It's called Econoclast. An economist who was an iconoclast, essentially a rebel against the idea of economic growth. Herman Daly was a professor at LSU first. He later actually was hired to the World Bank and helped correct some of their bad policies, ended up at the University of Maryland, and is really known worldwide. I was just at a conference in Norway last week, 1,200 people who were working on sustainable ecological economics, if you want to call it. And it was Herman Daly who started that field. So, but unfortunately, neither of our political parties seem to pay much attention to the real environmental impacts of the idea that we have to grow forever. What we need to do is redistribute. We have plenty of wealth already in this society, and if we spread it out a bit, I don't mean everybody has to have the same, but if we spread it out like we did under Roosevelt, everybody could have a very good life in this country without more growth.
John de Graaf, you're a hell of a guy. I really appreciate you being my friend and coming on the show. I want to call attention to a couple of people who've passed. Richard Croft, a.k.a. Pipe of Rising Up Angry, passed. And Brian Cozen, one of the owners of the No Exit Cafe, just passed. We'll talk more about him coming up. I want to encourage everybody to do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that John does, that Engineer Hal does, et cetera, et cetera. All power to the people. Over and out. See you next week. We want to thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show. New episodes air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Episodes air each following Thursday on CAN TV, 9 p.m. in Sweet Home Chicago on Channel 21, or streaming everywhere else at cantv.org. Audio episodes go live on WLUW each Saturday, 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM, or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org. They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform, and are also broadcast on Lumpen Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpenradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
Gone to limbo. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing